Captain Tae-sung stood on the bridge of the UHSN Indomitable, watching through the viewport as Nexus Prime grew larger. The massive space station hung in the darkness like a small moon, its surface covered with lights that sparkled like diamonds. He had dreamed of this moment for years. Humanity was finally here, ready to join the great civilizations of the galaxy. Behind him, Lieutenant Hyun-woo checked the weapon systems one final time. The young officer was nervous, his fingers moving quickly across the control panel. Tae-sung understood. They were about to meet species that had traveled the stars for thousands of years, while humans had only left their solar system 50 years ago. "Sir, we're receiving docking instructions," the communications officer said. Tae-sung nodded. "Take us in slowly. Let's make a good impression." The Indomitable moved forward with 12 other human ships. They were the pride of Earth's fleet, built with the best technology humanity could create. Each ship was covered in thick metal armor, painted in dark gray. Their hulls were smooth and angular, designed to deflect impacts. Large railgun turrets jutted from their sides, ready to fire metal slugs at incredible speeds. On the observation deck of Nexus Prime, hundreds of aliens gathered to watch the human fleet arrive. Ambassador Su-min stood among them, trying to keep her face calm even though her heart was racing. She had worked for 3 years to arrange this meeting. Everything depended on the next few hours. A tall crystalline being approached her. Its body was made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. This was Ambassador Vexithar of the Vrenthi, one of the most powerful species in the Galactic Council. "So these are the humans," Vexithar said. His voice sounded like wind chimes. "Their ships are quaint." Su-min forced a smile. "Our vessels may look different, but they are very capable." "I'm sure they are," Vexithar replied, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. More aliens joined them at the viewport. The Kulrath looked like giant insects with hard shells and multiple eyes. The Luminari were beings of pure energy, contained within specially designed suits. There were dozens of other species, each more advanced than the last. One of the Kulrath, Ambassador Kareth, clicked his mandibles together in what Su-min had learned was laughter. "Look at those primitive things. They're made of simple metal. Do they not have energy shielding? And those weapons," another alien added. "Are those kinetic cannons? How barbaric. They still throw metal at their enemies?" The laughter spread through the crowd. Su-min felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she kept her composure. "Our weapons are highly effective," she said quietly. "Against what?" Kareth asked, his multiple eyes gleaming with amusement. "Asteroids? Every civilized species uses plasma weapons or disruptor beams. Your railguns belong in a museum." Back on the Indomitable, Tae-sung couldn't hear the mocking, but he could feel it, the way the alien ships moved around them, keeping their distance as if the human vessels carried a disease, the way no one responded to their friendly hails. "They think we're primitives," Hyun-woo said, his jaw tight. "Let them think what they want," Tae-sung replied. "We'll prove ourselves when it matters." The docking procedure took 2 hours. When it was finally complete, Tae-sung and his senior officers took a shuttle to the station. Admiral Ji-won was waiting for them in the docking bay. She was a short woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Captain," she said, greeting him with a nod. "How was the journey?" "Uneventful, Admiral. But I don't think we're getting the warm welcome we hoped for." Ji-won's expression darkened. "No, we're not. I've been here for 3 days and the attitude hasn't improved. Come, the council meeting starts in an hour." They walked through the station's corridors. The architecture was incredible, with walls that seemed to shift colors and floors that felt solid but looked like glass. Aliens of every shape and size passed by, most ignoring the humans completely. Some stared with open curiosity while others looked away with what seemed like disgust. The council chamber was enormous, shaped like a bowl with seats rising in tiers. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated areas. The humans were given a small section near the back, almost in the shadows. The session began with the High Chancellor, a luminari named Torval, floating at the center of the chamber. His energy form pulsed with authority. "We gather today to consider the petition of humanity for membership in the Galactic Council," Torval announced. "Let us hear their case." Su-min stood and walked to the speaker's platform. She had prepared her speech carefully, highlighting humanity's achievements, their culture, and their desire for peaceful cooperation. She spoke for 20 minutes about Earth's history, about how humans had overcome their differences to unite under one banner. She talked about human science, art, and philosophy. When she finished, there was silence. Then Kareth stood. "We have reviewed the human application," the Kulrath said, "and while we acknowledge their enthusiasm, we cannot grant them full membership." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. "Your technology is centuries behind ours," Kareth continued. "Your ships are metal boxes with primitive weapons. You have no energy shields, no plasma cannons, no quantum drives. You are, frankly, not ready to stand among the great civilizations." "We may not have your technology," Sumin said, trying to keep her voice steady, "but we have something just as valuable. We have determination, adaptability, and courage." This brought actual laughter from several species. "Courage?" Vexthar said. "We have been traveling the stars for 10,000 years. We have seen countless species rise and fall. Your courage is admirable, but it is not enough. Perhaps in a few centuries, when you have advanced beyond throwing metal at your problems, you can apply again." The vote was called. Of the 47 species, only 2 voted to accept humanity as full members. 43 voted against and 2 abstained. "The motion fails," Torval announced. "Humanity will be granted observer status only. You may attend council meetings but have no voting rights. You will be assigned territories in the Outer Rim, away from the major trade routes." Sumin felt like she had been struck. Observer status was what they gave to primitive species that had barely discovered fire. The Outer Rim territories were worthless, filled with nothing but empty space and dying stars. She looked up at Admiral Jiwan, who sat stone-faced in the human section. The Admiral's hands were clenched into fists. As the session ended and the chamber emptied, Kareth walked past the humans. "Don't take it personally," he said with a clicking laugh. "Perhaps your grandchildren will be more advanced. Until then, enjoy your flying coffins." He gestured toward an image of the Indomitable displayed on a nearby screen. Such primitive vessels have no place in modern warfare. That night, the human delegation gathered in their assigned quarters. The mood was dark. 3 years of diplomatic work had resulted in humiliation. "They'll never respect us," one of the officers said bitterly. "To them, we'll always be the primitives who still use bullets." Admiral G1 stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "Then we'll prove them wrong," she said quietly. "They laugh at our ships because they don't understand them. They mock our weapons because they've never seen them in action." She turned to face her officers. "Let them laugh. One day they'll stop. And on that day, they'll understand what it means to underestimate humanity." Captain Taesung looked at his admiral and saw the fire in her eyes. He felt it too, burning in his chest. They had been mocked, dismissed, and insulted. But humanity had faced worse before. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. They would survive this too. The galaxy thought human ships were primitive jokes. They thought kinetic weapons were relics of a barbaric past. They thought humanity had no place among the stars. They would learn. Soon enough, they would all learn. 6 months had passed since the humiliation at Nexus Prime. The human fleet had retreated to the Outer Rim territories, a region of space that most galactic civilizations considered worthless. There were no valuable resources here, no strategic positions, just empty darkness and scattered asteroids. But Admiral Jiwan had used those months well. While the Galactic Council ignored them, humanity built. New ships rolled out of orbital shipyards around Earth and Mars. Weapons were tested and improved. Tactics were refined. The fleet grew from 13 ships to 40. Dr. Young-hee worked day and night in the weapons laboratory on Europa Station. She was a small woman with tired eyes and stained lab coat, but her mind was brilliant. She had taken the Council's mockery personally. "They think our railguns are primitive," she muttered to her assistant, adjusting calculations on her screen. "Let's show them what primitive can do." The breakthrough came in the form of depleted uranium rounds coated with a tungsten alloy. When fired at a significant fraction of light speed, these projectiles carried kinetic energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. Unlike energy weapons that could be dissipated by shields, these rounds were solid matter. They would punch through anything. "Test results are perfect," Young-hee told Admiral Jiwan over the video link. "The penetration power is beyond what we calculated." "Admiral, these rounds will go through energy shields like they're not even there." Jiwan smiled grimly. "How soon can we outfit the fleet?" 2 weeks. Make it 1. Meanwhile, Ambassador Su-min remained at Nexus Prime, enduring continued dismissal and mockery. But she kept her eyes and ears open, gathering intelligence. That's how she learned about the Ravager clans. The Ravagers were pirates, outcasts from various species who had banded together. For years they had been a minor nuisance, attacking small convoys and isolated stations. But recently they had grown bold. A warlord named Thexral, a rogue Vrenthi, had united the various pirate groups into a single fleet. They now commanded over 100 ships. The Galactic Council wasn't worried. Their vessels were technologically superior. A few pirates couldn't possibly threaten them. Commander Daehyun commanded the UHSN Shadow, a stealth frigate equipped with experimental cloaking technology. His ship had been conducting reconnaissance missions in the Outer Rim, mapping the territory and watching for threats. That's when he spotted the Ravager fleet massing near the Kepler Expanse. "Admiral, we have a situation," Daehyun reported, sending his data back to fleet headquarters. "The pirates are organizing. This isn't a random group anymore. They have military discipline." Admiral Jiwon studied the data. The Ravager fleet was moving toward Council space. Their target was unknown, but their intent was clear. "Send a warning to Nexus Prime," Jiwon ordered. "Tell them what we've found." The Council's response came 3 days later. It was brief and dismissive. "The Galactic Council appreciates the information from the human observers. We are monitoring the situation and are fully prepared to handle any criminal activity." Daehyun slammed his fist on his console when he heard. "They still don't take us seriously." 2 weeks later, a council convoy was traveling through neutral space. It carried diplomats from 5 different species, including Ambassador Su-min, who was returning from a conference. The convoy consisted of 3 council cruisers, each equipped with state-of-the-art shields and plasma cannons. The Ravagers struck without warning. 20 pirate ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in the convoy's path. Their weapons blazed, blue and green energy beams cutting through space. The council cruisers activated their shields immediately. The energy barriers shimmered as they absorbed the first impacts. The council commander, a luminary named Korseth, broadcast on all channels. "Attention, pirates. You are attacking a council convoy. Surrender now or be destroyed." The Ravagers' response was to intensify their attack. But something was wrong. The pirates weren't fighting like disorganized criminals. They moved with purpose, their ships coordinating perfectly. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking from multiple angles and retreating before the council ships could target them effectively. One of the council cruisers took heavy damage. Its shields flickered under the sustained assault. On the diplomatic transport, Su-min held onto her seat as the ship shook from nearby explosions. "We need reinforcements," Korseth transmitted. "All council ships in the area. We require immediate assistance." The nearest council fleet was 6 hours away. The convoy wouldn't last that long, but the Indomitable was only 40 minutes away. Captain Tae-sung had been conducting patrol exercises with 3 destroyers when the distress call came through. "Sir, council convoy under attack," the communications officer reported. "They're requesting help from any nearby vessels." Tae-sung didn't hesitate. "Set course maximum speed. All ships combat readiness." Lieutenant Hyunwoo turned from his weapons console. "Captain, we haven't been authorized to enter that sector." "People are dying," Tae-sung said flatly. "We're going." The 4 human ships accelerated, their fusion engines burning bright. When they arrived at the battle site, the scene was chaos. The council ships were taking heavy damage, their once bright shields now flickering weakly. Dead pirates floated in the void, but there were still 15 enemy vessels active. Tae-sung opened a channel to Commander Korseth. "This is Captain Tae-sung of the UHSN Indomitable. We're here to assist." There was a pause. Then Korseth's voice came back, strained and clearly reluctant. "Human ship, your assistance is not required. We have the situation under control. Return to your assigned territory." Another explosion rocked one of the council cruisers. Its shields collapsed entirely and enemy fire began chewing into its hull. "With respect, Commander, you don't look like you have control," Tae-sung said. He switched to the fleet channel. "All human vessels, weapons free. Target the pirate ships. Show them what our primitive guns can do." The 4 human ships dove into the battle. They moved differently than the council vessels. Instead of graceful arcs and sweeping turns, they used hard burns and sudden vector changes. Their movements were violent and unpredictable, following Newtonian physics that the pirates weren't expecting. The Indomitable locked onto the nearest pirate cruiser. "Fire," Taesung ordered. The railgun spoke. It wasn't a beam of light or a bolt of plasma. It was a solid slug of metal, accelerated to impossible speeds. The projectile crossed the distance in a heartbeat. The pirate cruiser had shields, the same type that had been absorbing Council plasma fire for the past 20 minutes. But shields were designed to disperse energy. They couldn't stop mass. The railgun round hit the shield and passed through it like it wasn't there. It struck the hull, punched through the armor plating, tore through the interior compartments, and exited the other side. The pirate ship shuddered and began venting atmosphere. But the round didn't stop. It continued forward and slammed into a second pirate vessel behind the first, crippling it as well. There was a moment of stunned silence across all channels. Then chaos erupted. "What was that?" one of the council officers shouted. "Their weapon went through the shields." "Impossible," Korseth said, but his sensors showed the truth. 2 pirate ships disabled with 1 shot. The other human destroyers opened fire. Their weapons were smaller than the Indomitable's main guns, but they fired faster. Streams of metal slugs poured into the pirate formation. Each hit was devastating. Shields meant nothing. Armor buckled and tore like paper. The pirates tried to adapt. They focused their fire on the human ships, but the humans had no energy shields to overwhelm. They had layered armor plating and point defense systems. Laser fire and plasma bolts that would have dropped Council shields simply scorched the metal hulls. One destroyer, the UHSN Relentless, took a direct hit from a pirate plasma cannon. The impact melted a section of armor, but the ship kept fighting. Automated systems sealed the breach, and the ship's backup systems kept it operational. Hyunwoo worked his console frantically, coordinating fire with the other ships. "Captain, targeting the command ship. Fire at will." The Indomitable's main gun fired again. The round struck Thexrel's flagship in the engine section. The explosion was catastrophic. The pirate command ship began spinning out of control. Seeing their leader's ship crippled, the remaining pirates broke formation and fled. They jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving their damaged vessels behind. The battle was over. It had lasted less than 10 minutes from the moment the human ships arrived. Taesung stood on his bridge, breathing hard. Around him, his crew was silent, staring at their screens in disbelief. "Status report," he said quietly. "Minor damage to outer hull. Relentless took heavier damage but is operational. No casualties across the fleet, sir." Taesung nodded slowly. Then he opened a channel to the Council ships. "Commander Korseth, are you all right?" The response took a long moment. When Korseth finally spoke, his voice was strange. "We're intact. Human ship, your assistance was unexpected. We're allies, Commander. Or we're supposed to be." Another pause. "Yes, thank you, Captain Taesung. Your intervention was decisive." On the diplomatic transport, Sumin watched through a viewport as the human ships took up protective positions around the damaged Council vessels. She saw the scorch marks on their hulls, the dents in their armor. 3 months after the convoy rescue, the situation in Council space had changed dramatically. The Ravager clans, humiliated by their defeat, declared open war. Pirate Lord Thexrel had survived his ship's destruction and now led his forces with cold fury. He had spent weeks gathering ships, recruiting mercenaries, and building a fleet that now numbered over 200 vessels. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. The Great Chamber buzzed with worried voices. Species that had known peace for millennia now faced a genuine military threat. High Chancellor Torval addressed the assembly. "The Ravager fleet is approaching the Therian cluster. If that system falls, they will control the major trade routes. We must respond with overwhelming force." "How large a fleet?" someone asked. 400 ships, Torval announced. "Every species will contribute. This will be the largest Council military operation in 1,000 years." In the back section, Ambassador Sumin listened carefully. She raised her hand to speak but was ignored. Finally, she stood and spoke anyway. "The human fleet requests permission to join the defense." The chamber fell silent. Then Ambassador Kareth clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement. "The convoy rescue was admirable, but this is a real battle. Your primitive ships would only get in the way. Our weapons proved effective against the Ravagers before," Sumin argued. "That was a skirmish against a small pirate group," Vexthar said dismissively. "This will be proper warfare between hundreds of ships. Your railguns may have surprised some criminals, but against organized resistance they will be insufficient. The vote was called. The council decided to handle the battle themselves. Humanity's offer was rejected. They were ordered to remain in the outer rim and not interfere. Admiral Jiwan received the news aboard the carrier UHSN Horizon, flagship of humanity's expanded fleet. She stood on the bridge surrounded by holographic displays showing the tactical situation. Beside her, Captain Minseo of the Horizon studied the same data. "They're making a mistake," Minseo said quietly. "The Ravagers have adapted. They're not fighting like pirates anymore," Jiwan nodded. "I know, but they won't listen to us." She looked at the star map showing the Therian cluster and the converging fleets. "How long until our battle group can reach the cluster?" 6 hours at maximum speed. Then we go. If they order us to leave, we'll leave. But we'll be there if they need us. Captain Taesung commanded a squadron of destroyers that would accompany the Horizon. He briefed his crew in the mess hall, his face serious. "The council doesn't want us there. They think we're going to embarrass ourselves. Maybe they're right. This will be the biggest space battle in recorded history. We'll be severely outnumbered even with the council fleet." He paused, looking at each crew member. "But we're going anyway. Because it's the right thing to do." Lieutenant Hyunwoo spoke up. "Sir, what if they actually order us away? What if they threaten to revoke our observer status? Then we lose our status," Taesung said simply. "But we save lives. That's worth more than any political position." The human battle group consisted of 12 destroyers, 4 cruisers including the Indomitable, and the carrier Horizon with its complement of 150 small fighters. It wasn't much compared to the massive fleets converging on the Therian cluster, but every ship was ready. In the fighter bay of the Horizon, pilot Sung Ho performed final checks on his interceptor. The small craft was basically a cockpit with engines and guns attached. It had no shields, minimal armor, and enough fuel for 2 hours of combat. But it was fast and maneuverable. "First major battle," his wingman said nervously. Sung Ho grinned. "Just remember your training. Fly like you're dodging through an atmosphere. These aliens have only fought in space for so long they've forgotten what real dogfighting looks like." The council fleet arrived at the Therian cluster first. 400 ships arranged themselves in a defensive formation around the inhabited planets. The vessels were impressive, sleek, and powerful, their hulls glowing with energy shield projections. Each ship bristled with plasma cannons and disruptor arrays. Admiral Vexthar commanded from his flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Infinite Light. He reviewed his forces with satisfaction. "This fleet could conquer half the galaxy if we chose. Some pirates don't stand a chance." The Ravagers dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. 240 ships, a mix of stolen military vessels, modified freighters, and custom-built warships. They formed a loose formation and began accelerating toward the council fleet. "All ships prepare to engage," Vexthar ordered. "Show them the power of civilized warfare." The 2 fleets closed to weapon range. The council ships opened fire first, brilliant beams of plasma and crackling disruptor bolts crossing the void. The Ravager shields lit up as they absorbed the impacts. Return fire came seconds later. The battle began as expected. Energy weapons struck shields which flared and held. Ships maneuvered in graceful arcs, their movements following established tactical doctrine that had been refined over thousands of years. It was almost ritualistic, like a deadly dance. Then everything changed. The Ravager ships launched missiles, not standard ship-to-ship missiles, but something new. The weapons detonated near the council ships and electromagnetic pulses erupted across the battlefield. Council vessels suddenly went dark as their systems overloaded. Ships that had been maneuvering smoothly now drifted, their shield generators offline, their weapons inoperable. "What just happened?" Someone shouted on the council command channel. "EMP weapons," a technician reported. "They're targeting our power systems." This was something new. Energy-based civilizations had built their technology around sophisticated power distribution systems. Everything ran on complex energy networks. A strong electromagnetic pulse could cascade through these systems, causing catastrophic failures. The Ravagers pressed their advantage. Without shields, the council ships were vulnerable. Plasma fire tore into hulls that were never meant to take direct hits. Ships began dying, their crews abandoning in escape pods. Admiral Vexthar watched in horror as his fleet took massive casualties in the first 10 minutes. "All ships switch to backup systems. Restore shields immediately." But the Ravagers kept firing EMP weapons. Every time a ship brought its shields back online, another pulse knocked them down. The Council fleet was being slaughtered. That's when the human battle group arrived. Admiral Jiwan took in the situation at a glance. They're using electromagnetic warfare. Clever. But our ships don't rely on energy systems the same way. All vessels, battle formation Delta. Prepare to engage. She opened a channel to Admiral Vexthar. This is Admiral Jiwan of the human fleet. We're here to assist. Vexthar's voice came back, strained and desperate. Human fleet, you are not authorized. We don't need... Another explosion rocked his ship. Yes, please help. Our systems are being overwhelmed. Understood. Implementing Operation Hammer. The human ships accelerated into the battle zone. Unlike the Council vessels with their graceful movements, the human ships used hard burns and violent direction changes. Their fusion drives flared bright as they cut through the battlefield. The Ravagers targeted them with EMP weapons. The pulses hit the human ships and nothing happened. The human vessels kept coming, their systems unaffected. Why aren't they shutting down? Thexrel demanded from his command ship. Their systems are different, one of his officers reported. They use mechanical backups in isolated systems. The electromagnetic pulses can't cascade through their ships the same way. The human destroyers opened fire. Railgun rounds streaked across space, each projectile moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The Ravager shields designed to stop energy weapons offered no protection. The solid slugs punched through shields and hulls like they were paper. One of the human cruisers, the UHSN Defiant, took a bold position. It flew directly into the middle of the Ravager formation and began firing its mass drivers in all directions. The rotating gun turrets created a sphere of death, railgun rounds flying outward at every angle. It was a maneuver impossible for ships that relied on directed energy weapons. 5 Ravager ships were crippled in 30 seconds. What kind of insane tactic is that? Kareth asked from his council ship, watching in amazement. Human tactics, Suman said quietly, a slight smile on her face. Captain Mincio gave the order. Launch all fighters. The Horizon's launch bays opened and 150 small fighters poured out. Pilot Sung Ho led the first squadron, his hands steady on the controls despite his racing heart. All wings break and attack, he ordered. Remember your training. Fly like you're in atmosphere. The human fighters swarmed the Ravager ships. The aliens had never seen anything like it. These tiny craft moved with impossible agility, using thrust vectoring and spin maneuvers that no sane pilot would attempt. They darted between larger ships using the Ravager's own vessels as cover. Sung Ho lined up on a pirate cruiser's engine section. His targeting computer locked on and he fired. The small railguns mounted on his fighter weren't powerful enough to destroy a capital ship, but they didn't need to be. He aimed for the vulnerable spots: engines, sensor arrays, weapon mounts. His rounds tore into the cruiser's drive section. The ship began spinning out of control. The aftermath of the Battle of Therion Cluster sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. For the first time in thousands of years, the Council had faced a military threat they couldn't easily overcome. And it was the humans, the species they had dismissed as primitive, who had saved them. Emergency sessions were called. The Grand Chamber of Nexus Prime was filled with anxious voices. Some species praised humanity's contribution. Others felt threatened by this display of military capability from such a young civilization. Ambassador Su Min attended these meetings, watching the politics unfold. She noticed something troubling. Certain delegates, particularly Ambassador Kareth and some of his allies, seemed almost angry that humanity had proven itself. Instead of gratitude, she saw resentment. In a private meeting with Ambassador Vexithar, she raised her concerns. Some council members aren't happy about what happened at Therion. Vexthar's crystalline form dimmed slightly. You are correct. There are those who fear humanity's rise. They believe your military strength makes you dangerous. We saved council lives, Sumin said, frustrated. How does that make us dangerous? Because you did it so effectively, Vexithar replied. Some worry that if humanity can defeat the Ravagers so easily, what could you do to us? Back on Earth, Agent Bora worked in the intelligence division. She was a quiet woman who spent her days analyzing intercepted communications and data patterns. Most of her work was routine, monitoring trade disputes and diplomatic messages. But 3 weeks after Therion, she found something strange. Encrypted transmissions between certain council members and unknown parties in the outer systems. The encryption was sophisticated, but human computer systems had their own advantages. While alien technology was more advanced in many ways, humans had spent centuries perfecting digital warfare and code breaking. Bora worked for 72 hours straight, barely sleeping until she cracked the encryption. What she found made her blood run cold. She immediately contacted Admiral Jiwan. "Admiral, we have a serious problem. I'm sending you the data now." Jiwan reviewed the files in her secure office. As she read, her expression grew darker. "This can't be real. I've verified it 3 times," Bora said over the video link. "The evidence is solid." The intercepted communications showed that Councillor Kareth and several other delegates had been secretly funding the Ravager clans for months. They had provided intelligence about Council convoy routes, weapons specifications, and tactical information. The entire pirate threat had been manufactured, but the conspiracy went deeper. The plan had been to let the Ravagers become a serious problem, then use humanity to solve it. Once the pirates were defeated, certain Council factions intended to frame humanity as collaborators with the Ravagers. This would justify removing humanity from Council space entirely, possibly by force. "They wanted to get rid of us all along," Jiwan said quietly. "The convoy attack, the battle at Therion, it was all designed to set us up." "What do we do?" Bora asked. Jiwan thought carefully. "We need to present this to the full Council, publicly. If we try to handle it through private channels, it will disappear. Ambassador Sumin needs to see this immediately." The evidence was transmitted to Nexus Prime through secure channels. When Sumin received it, she couldn't believe what she was reading. But the communications were clear. Kareth had been coordinating with Thexral, providing the Pirate Lord with EMP weapons and tactical data. She requested an emergency council session. At first, the request was denied. But Sumin invoked an ancient council law that allowed any member species to demand a hearing if they had evidence of treason against the council itself. The session was scheduled for 3 days later. In those 3 days, Kareth and his co-conspirators tried everything to stop the hearing. They claimed the evidence was fabricated. They said humans couldn't be trusted. They delayed and obstructed, but Sumin persisted. On the day of the hearing, she stood before the full council and presented the evidence. She played the intercepted communications, showing clearly that Kareth had been funding and directing the Ravagers. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates were shocked. Others were outraged. Kareth stood, his mandibles clicking furiously. "This is a human fabrication," he shouted. "They are trying to divide the council. Can't you see? They want to turn us against each other so they can seize power." "The communications include your personal encryption codes," Sumin said calmly. "We have transaction records showing money transfers from accounts you control. We have messages in your own words. Lies. Human technology is inferior. They couldn't possibly crack our encryption." Admiral Vexthar stood slowly. "Actually, I have had our own experts verify these communications. They are genuine." He looked at Kareth with something like sadness. "Old friend, why would you do this?" Kareth's attitude changed. The bluster fell away, replaced by cold anger. "Because humanity is a threat to the natural order. They are too aggressive, too militaristic. They will dominate the galaxy if given the chance. I acted to protect the Council. By funding pirates who killed thousands of innocents?" Another delegate asked, horrified. "By creating a situation that would expose humanity's true nature," Kareth replied. "The plan was to let them defeat the Ravagers, then reveal their connection to the pirates. It would have proven they were dangerous. But we had no connection to the pirates," Sumin said quietly. "You were going to lie." "For the greater good," Kareth said, unrepentant. "Humanity must be contained. If not by politics, then by force." The council voted to arrest Kareth and his co-conspirators immediately, but as security moved to detain them, alarms suddenly blared throughout Nexus Prime. "Fleet contact," a technician shouted. "Multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel." "It's the Ravagers!" Over 300 vessels. The viewing screen showed the impossible. The Ravager fleet, which should have been scattered and broken after Therion, was here in force. And they were larger than before. Thexral's voice boomed across all channels. "Galactic Council, you have interfered with our operations for the last time. Today Nexus Prime falls. Today we show the galaxy that your age is over." High Chancellor Torval's energy form pulsed with urgency. All available forces defend the station. Where is the main fleet? Scattered across council space, someone reported. We pulled ships from everywhere to defend Therion. The nearest significant force is 6 hours away. We have the station defense fleet, Vexthar said. 40 ships. Against 300. He didn't need to say the rest. They were going to lose. Ambassador Su Min ran to the communications center. She sent an emergency transmission to Admiral Ji-Wan. Admiral, Nexus Prime is under attack. We need immediate assistance. The main fleet is too far away. You're the only help we can get. On the horizon, Admiral Ji-Wan received the message. She looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was spread across the outer rim. She could gather maybe 40 ships in time to reach Nexus Prime. 40 human ships against 300 Ravagers. Captain Min Seo stood beside her. Admiral, the Council rejected us. They conspired against us. Some of them wanted us dead. We don't owe them anything. Ji-Wan was quiet for a long moment. Around the bridge, her crew watched her, waiting. Finally, she spoke. You're right. We don't owe them anything. But there are innocent people on that station, civilians, children. They didn't conspire against us. They're just scared people who need help. She looked at Min Seo. We're not fighting for their respect anymore. We're not even fighting for recognition. We're fighting because it's who we are. She activated the fleet-wide channel. All human vessels, this is Admiral Ji-Wan. Nexus Prime is under attack. The Council fleet cannot reach it in time. We are the only help available. I know many of you are angry at how the Council has treated us. I know some of you think we should let them face this alone. She paused. But we're better than that. We're humanity. When someone needs help, we don't ask if they deserve it. We just help. All ships set course for Nexus Prime. Maximum speed. We go to war. Across the fleet, every captain responded affirmatively. 40 ships, the entire human military force, turned toward Nexus Prime. Captain Tae-sung stood on the Indomitable's bridge. Lieutenant Hyunwoo looked up from his console. Sir, we're outnumbered 7-1. The odds of survival are minimal. I know, Tae-sung said. But we're going anyway. Prepare all weapons. Today we show the galaxy what humanity really means. On Nexus Prime, the station's defense fleet engaged the Ravagers. They fought bravely, but they were overwhelmed. Energy weapons flashed across space as ships died. The station's shields began taking hits. Inside the council chamber, delegates who had spent years in peaceful debate now huddled in fear as explosions rocked the structure. Ambassador Su Min stayed calm, helping organize evacuation procedures. Ambassador Kareth, still in custody, watched the chaos with grim satisfaction. This is what happens when you trust primitives. The humans aren't coming. Why would they? We treated them like dirt. They're probably glad to see us finally face consequences. Su Min looked at him with pity. You really don't understand humans at all, do you? That's why you are always going to fail. 40 minutes later, as Nexus Prime's shields began to fail and the defense fleet was reduced to less than 10 ships, space suddenly rippled. 40. The human fleet crashed into the Ravager armada like a hammer striking glass. Admiral Ji-Wan had ordered something that no sane commander would attempt. Every ship accelerated to maximum speed, aiming directly at the enemy formation. It was called the Death Charge, and it was insane. Admiral, we're going too fast. Captain Min Seo warned from the horizon. If we hit anything, we won't survive. That's the point, Ji-Wan replied calmly. They expect us to slow down. They expect caution. We give them chaos instead. The human ships roared forward, their fusion engines burning at dangerous levels. The Ravager fleet tried to adjust, bringing weapons to bear on the charging vessels. Energy beams reached out, striking human hulls. Armor melted and buckled, but the ships kept coming. On the Indomitable, Captain Tae-sung gripped his command chair as the ship shook from enemy fire. Warning alarms blared across the bridge. A plasma bolt had punched through the armor on Deck 3, killing 6 crew members instantly. Damage report, he shouted over the noise. Hull breach on Deck 3. We've lost starboard maneuvering thrusters. Forward shield generators are offline. The weapons officer looked up, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Sir, we can't take much more of this. We don't need to take more, Tae-sung said. We just need to get close. Hyunwoo, prepare all railguns. Fire the moment we're in effective range. Lieutenant Hyunwoo worked his console despite his shaking hands. Around him, the bridge crew fought to keep the Indomitable operational. They were terrified, but they didn't stop. They were human, and humans didn't quit. Range in 10 seconds, Hunwoo reported. 5 seconds, 3, 2, 1, firing. The Indomitable's main railgun fired, joined by dozens of smaller mass drivers. The ship shuddered from the recoil. Across space, every human vessel opened fire simultaneously. Thousands of kinetic rounds crossed the distance in heartbeats. The effect was devastating. Railgun rounds punched through Ravager shields and hulls. Ships that had been advancing confidently suddenly found themselves torn apart. One destroyer took 7 direct hits and simply disintegrated, breaking into burning fragments. But the human fleet was taking terrible damage. 3 destroyers were crippled in the first minute of engagement. The cruiser UHSN Valor took a direct hit to its reactor section. The ship's captain managed to send one final transmission before his vessel exploded. "For humanity," he said simply. Then the Valor was gone, taking 200 brave souls with it. On the horizon, Captain Minseo launched every fighter she had. 150 small craft poured into the battle. Among them was pilot Sung Ho, already an ace from the Therian battle. "All wings spread out," Sung Ho ordered. "Attack pattern Omega. Target their engines and weapons." The human fighters swarmed the Ravager fleet like angry insects. They moved in ways that defied normal space combat tactics, using atmospheric dogfighting techniques that the pirates had never encountered. Sung Ho lined up on a cruiser's sensor array and fired, his small railguns tearing into the delicate equipment. "First kill," his wingman called out. "Don't celebrate yet," Sung Ho replied, pulling hard to avoid return fire. "There's 300 more of them." The Ravagers adapted quickly. They began focusing fire on individual human ships, trying to overwhelm them one at a time. The destroyer UHSN Thunder became their target. 20 enemy ships concentrated fire on it simultaneously. The Thunder's captain, Commander Dae-hyun, watched his systems fail one by one. "All hands abandon ship. Get to the escape pods. Sir, you need to evacuate too," his first officer shouted. "Not yet," Dae-hyun said calmly. He gripped his controls. "Not until I finish this." He aimed the dying Thunder directly at a cluster of Ravager ships and pushed the engines to maximum. The destroyer, already crippled and burning, accelerated into a suicide run. Dae-hyun's last act was to activate every explosive charge on the ship. The Thunder struck a Ravager battlecruiser and detonated. The explosion took out the enemy ship and damaged 3 others nearby. Commander Dae-hyun died instantly, but he took 200 enemy fighters with him. Admiral Ji-won watched from the horizon as another ship vanished from her tactical display. They had lost 6 ships now, nearly 1,000 people dead, but they were making the Ravagers pay dearly for every kill. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the station," her communications officer reported. "Ambassador Su-min wants to speak with you." Su-min's face appeared on the screen. Behind her, the council chamber was in chaos. "Admiral, the station's shields are failing. We have maybe 10 minutes before they breach the hull. If you can't stop them soon, everyone here will die." "We're doing everything we can," Ji-won said. The horizon shook as enemy fire struck the shields. "But we're outnumbered and taking heavy losses." "I know. I just wanted to say thank you. You came even though you had every reason not to. That means everything." Ji-won nodded. "Get your people to the shelter zones. We're not done yet." She cut the transmission and looked at her tactical officer. "How many enemy ships have we destroyed?" 73 confirmed kills. We've damaged maybe 50 more. 73 down. Over 200 still active. The math was brutal. At this rate, the human fleet would be destroyed before the Ravagers were stopped. Ji-win made a decision. "Send a message to Captain Tae-sung. Tell him to implement Protocol Omega." Her staff went silent. Protocol Omega was a contingency plan that no one ever wanted to use. It meant sacrificing the capital ships to buy time for the fighters and smaller vessels to finish the battle. "Admiral, that's a death sentence for everyone on the cruisers and destroyers," Minseo said quietly. "I know," Ji-won replied, "but it's the only way to save the station." The message went out. On the Indomitable, Captain Tae-sung received it. He read it twice, then looked around his damaged bridge at his crew. They were exhausted, bleeding, terrified, but they were still fighting. "New orders," he said calmly. "All capital ships are to form a defensive wall between the enemy and the station. We hold the line no matter what." Hyunwoo looked up from his console. "Sir, that's suicide." "I know." Tae-sung smiled slightly. "But someone has to buy time for those fighters to finish the job. Might as well be us." He opened the ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the captain. We've received new orders. We're going to place ourselves between the enemy and Nexus Prime. We're going to take everything they throw at us and keep fighting until there's nothing left to fight with. It's been an honor serving with all of you. Now let's show these bastards what humanity is made of. The remaining human capital ships formed a wall in space. 8 cruisers and 4 destroyers arranged themselves in a line, facing the Ravager fleet. Behind them, Nexus Prime continued to burn. Ahead of them, over 200 enemy ships advanced. The Ravagers recognized what was happening and intensified their attack. Every weapon fired at once, a storm of energy and metal that tore into the human line. The UHSN Defiant was the first to fall. Its hull ruptured in dozens of places, atmosphere venting in great plumes. But even as it died, its guns kept firing. The crew stayed at their stations firing until the very end. The Indomitable took hit after hit. The armor plating that had seemed so impressive now melted and tore. Bulkheads collapsed. Fires raged through the corridors. The ship was dying, but Captain Tae-sung stood on his bridge, still giving orders. Hyunwoo, target that battleship. The big one, directly ahead. Sir, the main gun is damaged. I don't know if it will fire. Try anyway. Hyunwoo activated the firing sequence. Deep in the ship's core, the railgun mechanism engaged. It was damaged, misaligned, probably going to explode. But it fired one last time. Dr. Young-hee's experimental Thor's hammer round. A depleted uranium projectile accelerated to 99% of light speed, emerged from the barrel. The recoil tore the entire gun assembly apart, but the round was already gone. It crossed 50,000 kilometers in 2 seconds. It hit Pirate Lord Thexerol's personal dreadnought in the command section. The kinetic energy released was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The dreadnought simply ceased to exist, vaporized instantly. The shockwave from the impact was visible across the entire system, a rippling wave of energy. With their leader dead and the human ships refusing to die quietly, the Ravager formation began to falter. Ships started pulling back, trying to escape the terrible fire from the dying human vessels. That's when the fighters struck. Sung-ho led his squadron in a coordinated attack on the confused enemy fleet. Without the capital ships to target, the Ravagers focused on the station again, making them vulnerable to the small, fast fighters. All wings, this is for our fallen ships, Sung-ho shouted. Make every shot count. The human fighters tore through the Ravager rear formations. They aimed for engines and reactors, crippling ships rather than destroying them. It was more effective. A crippled ship blocked movement and created confusion. On the horizon, Admiral Ji-won watched the battle turn. The sacrifice of the capital ships had bought the time they needed. The enemy formation was collapsing. Ships were retreating. They were winning, but the price was terrible. On her display, the Indomitable's signal flickered and went dark. The ship was gone. Captain Tae-sung and his entire crew were dead. Ji-won closed her eyes briefly. Honor to the fallen, she whispered. The remaining Ravager ships, seeing their cause was lost, began jumping.